Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 8. Got somebody helping us out today. Everybody say hi to Zena. Come here, Z. Alright, sit down. Sit down, Zena. I guess she's not going to sit down. Say hi to everybody, Zena. Zena! See how much she pays attention to what's going on. Okay, so here we go with Chapter 8. Alright, what do you see out there, Z? Alright, so we're going to get this going. Sorry. Alright, this is Chapter 8 called Winter. He felt alone now, always alone. He existed in a world that he believed, knew would end for him soon. In the middle of the unit, drilling, eating, and listening to the officers with men sitting, packed all around him, he was alone. Charlie was one of the men detailed to provide beef for the sick men in the hospital. Now this is not going to be good, guys and girls. Pay attention to this one. Sorry about this. Another school building the Army had temporarily commandeered, but there were no cattle available. I'm going to warn you ahead of time. This is not going to be fun. What's up, Z? All right. Look to the rebel horses, the doctor said. The men have to have meat. There had been a brush with Confederate cavalry along the river. A rebel unit had made a discovery raid early one morning and had the bad luck to run into a full company of Union soldiers with loaded rifles already arranged in firing order for a defensive drill. The outcome had resulted in many empty rebel saddles and 11 captured horses. Normally the horses would be used to pull artillery. The death rate for horses in combat was worse than that for men because they were a much bigger target. But in this case, it was decided to kill the horses to get meat for the sick men, and Charlie and 3 other soldiers were ordered to slaughter them. Told you it wasn't good. It did not bother Charlie to kill beef or pigs or poultry. You know, poultry, like chickens. But having to shoot each horse in the head and cut its throat and gut it and skin it, yeah, I hear you, Z, put him on the edge of mutiny. He had been raised with work horses and had come to love them. Killing the horses, watching them drop as they were shot in the head, made him almost physically ill. It was a miserable day. They lied to the sick men and told them it was beef, but those men knew. Horse fat is yellow, yellow as butter, and beef fat is white, and the men knew the meat was from horses. They ate it anyway and were grateful, but the whole day struck a sour note that added to Charlie's general gloom. At 4 the next morning, when they were called out into formation to march south, he was in a foul mood. They had no warning of the impending movement, and the rumors flew. There was a big battle coming. There had been a big battle, and they were going to march all the way to Richmond. The South had won the war. The South had lost the war. Excuse me, I should have said it the other way first. The rumors were the South had lost the war. The rumors were the South had won the war. So rumors were flying. Charlie stomped around at first, still angry over slaughtering the horses, but it was a fine morning. So cold that the muddy roads were frozen and made for easy walking, and the troops made good time. They walked all day. Charlie thought it must have been close to 20 miles. After a while, the men were too tired and winded to talk, and there was silence. At just after 3 in the afternoon, Charlie heard the sounds of artillery booming about 2 miles off. He had a practiced ear now for the tools of combat and knew from the frequency of fire, a constant thunder, that there were a lot of guns, which meant a lot of targets. As his unit drew closer, he heard the rattling, ripping sound of thousands of rifles being fired. Soon he knew he would be involved in the fighting. He checked his cartridge box as he walked, and making sure his rifle was loaded and capped, and he felt the fear building. always the fear. The men marched down a country lane in the late afternoon. At any other time, it would have been a beautiful place. Trees lined the roadway, and though their leaves were gone, the bare branches bent over the road, creating a cover. The sun shone through and dappled the road in light, but Charlie saw none of it. The sounds were louder now, much louder, and the chattering of the rifles was continuous. Half a mile, he thought. It's just half a mile to the fighting. He listened expertly while they marched. The lane ended a quarter-mile ahead in a T. Some of the firing was off to the right, but most was to the left. They would probably be told to move left into the worst of the fighting. For a change, Charlie was wrong. At the end of the T, they were stopped. Throw down your packs and bedrolls. Carry only your rifle, cartridges, bayonet, and canteens. Form a line of battle to the right. To the right, the sergeants yelled. The officers on horses dismounted, and with the sergeants directed the men down the road until they were stretched a quarter mile, then across a rail fence into a field of grain stubble. Always a field, Charlie thought. There's always fear and always a meadow. Once out in the open, he could see more of the battle. In front of him, for the moment, there were no soldiers, rebel or Union, just a field that stretched away a quarter mile to a line of trees. There was no foliage in the trees, but even as bare as they were, he could see no rebel troops or artillery to their front. Off to their left, well away, close to a mile, an absolute inferno raged. Artillery from both sides covered the battlefield with smoke, and the din of cannon and rifle fire was constant and deafening. Whenever the smoke cleared in small gusts of breeze, he could see men dropping by the hundreds, broken and crumpled and falling. Nothing, Charlie thought as he watched the fight, absolutely nothing could live through that. And he was grateful that it was happening to others, but not to him. And not to him. There they are! Somebody near him cried. In the trees! Charlie squinted and saw them. Not infantry this time, but assembling back in the trees were troops of cavalry. The horses jostling each other and kicking as they were pulling alongside each other. They're going to come at us. They're sending horse against us, somebody yelled. Ready on line! An officer in front of them walked back and forth with a saber. Do not fire until directed, and then fire at will. On my command the first time. Front ranks kneel. Charlie was in the second rank, and he stood while the front rank kneeled. The horses moved out of the trees, walking forward in a line. Close on 100 of them. Charlie thought, watching. They're 100 and they're going to try to ride over us. He saw the glint of sun on cavalry sabers and carbines. They were still 300 yards distant, but he could see the shine of horses' hair and the splash of light off bridle hardware and chest straps. The horses began to walk faster, and then trot. The men holding them in good line. Present arms! Officers and sergeants called, and men raised their rifles, cocking the hammers. Wait for it. Wait for it. Not yet, boys. Not yet. A sergeant in the front moved back to the ranks to get out of the line of fire. Aim for the horses. When you get the command, aim low. Hit the horses to break the men. More meat for the sick, Charlie thought, and he felt bad for having to kill the horses. He didn't fret the men at all. They were going to kill him, and he didn't mind killing them first. But he hated shooting the horses. They started to canter. 200 yards now, 150, 100 yards. The rebel troopers were screaming that chattering, high-pitched rebel yell. Yeah! Wow. And the horses were full out, eating the distance. 50 yards. I could hit them with a chucked corn cob, Charlie thought, spit flying out of the horses' mouths, hooves rumbling against the frozen ground. We'll never stop them, Charlie thought. No way in Hades can we stop them. Fire! At no more than 30 yards, over 600 men fired in a volley at 100 charging horses. The result was devastating. Charlie held high and took a trooper full in the chest, but most of the other men held on the horses, and not one animal came through unhit. In a great cloud they went down, somersaulting, rolling over the troopers on their backs, breaking themselves, and the men, and the screams of the wounded horses hit by soft, large caliber expanding bullets. Sorry about this, guys and girls. Horses with heads blown open, horses with jaws shot away, horses with eyes shot out or with intestines tangling in their hooves, horses torn and dying, screamed louder than 1,000, louder than 1,000,000 men. Reload and fire at will! Charlie automatically loaded, raised and fired, but there were few targets. Those horses back on their feet were quickly shot down, and any man who stood was hit 10, 20 times. Cease fire! Silence except for the screaming horses and the groaning of wounded men. Charlie reloaded, capped his rifle, and kneeled, resting. He was thirsty and took a sip from his canteen. He did not look at the horses stumbling and kicking and falling. Was that it? He wondered. Just the one charge? It was nearly dark now, a soft dusk, and he looked to the rear to see where they might camp for the night and get fires going for coffee and heat. He loved coffee, though it tore his guts and gave him a constant stomachache, and he thought of going to the shattered Confederate charge to see if they had any sugar in their saddlebags. There was good sugar in the South, and he might find some of it for his coffee. He salivated, thinking of coffee with sugar in it. On the left, form a line of battle and wheel left. He turned and his heart nearly stopped. Coming from their left oblique, walking toward them in the gathering twilight, seemed to be the whole rebel army. 2,000, Charlie thought, maybe 3,000 of them, marching straight at Charlie in a head-on attack. Range 400, the sergeants called. Set sights for 400. Fire when ready. Charlie thought it more like 300 yards, but he flipped up the rear sight for 400 and raised and fired. He didn't hear his rifle because everybody around him fired at the same time. Some of the rebels fell. Not many, not nearly enough. So Charlie reloaded and fired, then again and again, and each time the Union soldiers fired, more of the rebels fell. Jerking backward and down, spinning forward, sitting back with the shock of being hit. The rebels had not fired yet, but had started to trot. They were down to 250 yards, and Charlie and the men around him kept up a steady rate of fire. Charlie fired 15 rounds and hit perhaps 7 or 8 rebels, but most of the men shot high, a common failing when firing on advancing infantry. They were only 75 yards away now. It was nearly dark, and the flash from the rifles momentarily blinded Charlie. At 50 yards, the rebels fired, and at least 1,500 bullets tore into the Union line. Men went down in droves, 20 around Charlie alone. His own clothing was hit 4 times, the brim on his cap sliced off. Wood knocked off the stock of his rifle, and one of his shoe heels had been creased. "Fix bayonets!" It was to be steel, Charlie saw. The men from Minnesota could have run, but they didn't. They held their ground, and Charlie held with them. With his bayonet locked into his muzzle, he loaded one last time just as the rebels hit the Union line. Oh, he thought, this is nasty work. This is right nasty work. It was nearly dark and hard to tell uniforms apart in the bad light and the smoke from firing, and Charlie did not know where to turn, where to fight. The decision wasn't his. In the murk, a man suddenly appeared. His bayoneted rifle aimed at Charlie's chest. Charlie parried with his own rifle and took the rebel soldier just below the breastbone with his bayonet. The man had been running so hard he ran himself onto the bayonet before falling off to the side, dying as he fell, his lungs and heart torn. Charlie's bayonet was stuck, and he had to put his foot on the man's chest to jerk it loose. After that, there was no order, there was no sense, no plan. Charlie became a madman. He attacked anything and everything that came into his range. Slashing, clubbing, hammering, jabbing, cutting, and always the screaming in fear and anger, and finally in a kind of rabid, insane joy, the joy of battle, the joy of winning, the joy of killing to live. And at last there was nothing around to hit. To fight, to kill, he stood with the rifle hanging at his side, his bayonet bent to the tip. The stock shattered. His arms weak, his legs soft, his chest heaving as he sucked air, his throat rasping. "They've run," somebody said. "They've took foot." "You're hit." A corporal stood in front of Charlie. "No, I'm all right." "You're hit there, in the shoulder." Charlie looked down. He was covered in blood. His arm and chest and pants were wet with it. "The surgeon's tent is back there half a mile. In those trees. Can you walk it?" "I think so." "Well, go it then. Get patched. We'll see you later." Charlie walked in a kind of daze, dragging his broken rifle by the sling. With the dark, the temperature had plummeted, but he didn't feel the cold. He didn't feel anything. He saw the lanterns of the surgeon and the ambulance drivers, and he walked toward them. Somebody in a bloody apron stopped him and held a lantern up, lighting his face with a yellow glow. "Where are you hit?" I don't know. "They sent me back. I think it's my shoulder, but it don't seem to hurt." "Over there. Sit with that group by the tent, and we'll get you to where you need. We'll get to you when we can." The man turned back to the tent with no sides, where a doctor working by lantern light was sawing a leg off of a soldier. Near the tent was a pile of arms and legs that stood 4 feet high and 10 or 12 feet long. Ambulance wagons kept coming with more men, and Charlie moved to an area where 15 or 20 men lay on the ground, waiting for attention. Off to the other side of the tent, there was another group of 200 or 300 men. They were not moving, and Charlie realized they were dead. He sat and he waited for the pain to come. Once when he was a boy, he struck his foot with an axe. The blade had cut a 3-inch gash between two of his toes, and he walked to town to get it sewed up. It hadn't hurt for the entire walk. Hadn't hurt until the doctor had stitched it up, and he'd walked home. Then it kept him up all night. He thought it would be the same here, but the pain didn't come. He tried to sip some water from his canteen, but it had frozen into slush, and he couldn't drain through the neck of the bottle, so he lay back on the ground. Men around him moaned, and some died, waiting to be taken under the tent. Presently, it could have been an hour, a day, a week, for Charlie no longer thought in terms of time, no longer really thought at all. The man with the bloody apron came back to him. "Check your coat. Let's see how bad you're hurt." Charlie unbuttoned his greatcoat, then his uniform jacket and his flannel shirt. Let's see. The attendant held the lantern up, pulled the shirt away, and looked down the front and the back. "Hell, boy, you ain't hit." "I'm not?" "Not a scratch. That's other men's blood all over you." "Oh." You can go back." Not yet." A doctor came out of the tent. I need help here. The wind is making up, and the cold is freezing my hands. I need some kind of windbreak. See if the two of you can't fix something up." "Well, with what?" The attendant looked around. "There's nothing here." The doctor looked around, then back, then at the bodies. "Use them." "The dead?" "They won't feel it." "You!" He pointed a bloody hand at Charlie. "Give them help there. Pile them up to stop the wind from the side of the tent." So they did, each taking an end. They moved the bodies, stacking them like bricks and angling them at the corners so they would not tip over, until they had a stout frozen wall 5 feet high and 30 feet long to stop the wind. When it was done, Charlie lay on the ground on the lee side of the dead men's wall just to get out of the wind for a minute and get warm. And he slept there for 5 hours, sheltered by the dead. Third battle. Well, that was something. Something's happening with Charlie here. I'm going to have a little discussion, I think, for you to check out on Schoology. There'll be a link there. Why don't you give it a look-see and let me know what you think. Thanks for listening in on it. Sorry about the whining from Zena. I think she's got to go out for a walk. We'll talk to you guys later.